Hello, everyone, and welcome to Open Mic UK with our lovely host again, Kathy and Susie. And we have an amazing guest with us tonight. Well, today or tonight, depending on where you are. John Oliver. John, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
I'll let you introduce yourself to our guests.
Well, thanks for the invitation. And before introducing myself, actually, I leapt at this since Ramzi and Susie, we've had an amazing chance to practice some witnessing. My most recent adventures in the last 4 years have been filming portraits, and so Ramzi and Susie and I did some portraits where I, in fact, ask no questions. I'm sitting in the silence unconditionally behind the camera and really allowing for a sort of heart-to-heart connection and invitation of whatever wants to be spoken in the moment. It's a revelation that on film you can sense there's a energetic difference. But this is actually sort of a long thread over the last 15 years. I've been working with narratives and working in organizational development and more sort of consulting in the corporate world with narratives. And so I like to consider that more as sort of an anthropological approach in organizations. I've been fascinated about the psychology of collaboration, the psychology of collectives. And so, yep, the social sciences has been a cornerstone of my work. And then prior to that, I've been really between the technology. I had quite a bit of my career in the technology world, but then also in the human factors. So I'm finally committing to the infinitely mysterious, in some ways, aspect of our spiritual journey. How do we dare bring in the spiritual lens into our everyday lives and even into our working lives? And towards that also, I'm, in the last 4 years, committing to an artistic practice, experimenting in many different domains, sculpture, painting, as well as even some sort of small performance experimentations. And the latest video witnessing, I almost consider sort of an artistic practice of sitting people in silence. So yeah, hopefully that's a first picture to paint.
That's a huge picture with a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, John. Just to connect how we got connected up, I suppose, was at the Science and Consciousness Conference in the UK last year is when I met you, but I had heard about you through another mutual friend of ours, Sue, when I watched one of your witnessing narrative videos that you worked with, that you created, I suppose, with her. And I remember just being so intrigued by just how you set that up. And when Ramzi and I started working with Kathy to create the Spirit Cafe, I really had this clear vision that this would be a really good way to link each of us together, and then, to feel and have that witnessing to see what was the Spirit Cafe. It was a beautiful opportunity for us. So I was really glad when I got to meet you finally in the UK and make the proposal, could we do this remotely? And it's amazing. Like, one of my first questions is, how does it feel on your end? Like, what are the differences from when you do it remotely, like you did with us all being in 3 different countries, and versus when you were doing it with people in person? How does it differ?
Well, it's actually, I was forced during COVID to mainly begin my portraits remotely. And I had maybe 3 in-person portraits before COVID, and then switched to remote, and had some great opportunities with filming on across continents. So filming, I'm based in the southwest of France, and I filmed 3 people quite quickly in the United States. And it's fascinating because there's almost a quality that is deeper when filming remotely, which I never expected either. And so it's on one level I guess a sort of a proof of a universal opportunity that whatever the distance, we can connect, and it's almost like an astral projection. And Suzi and I were at a conference, yes, in the UK called Science and Consciousness, and we're looking into things like remote viewing and even the whole concept of distance and time collapsing. And so it does feel, in some ways I'm tapping into those aspects, those qualities. And I've even filmed, yes, one musician who's in the Midwest of the US, and we happened to be camping, and I was sitting in the back of my van in a campsite. And there's some extraordinary moments in that. So even if I'm in a fairly sort of unusual environment with some distractions, I was so delighted to see that the ability for me to, yes, there's an initial meditation. And so there's a sort of a synchronization of our breathing before we are sitting together in silence. So those mini practices of initiating the first few minutes of the recording, whether you're remote or in person, it's a little difference ultimately, to answer your question.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
How did it come about, John? What was your inspiration to start videoing those narratives? Like, did it happen by accident, or how did you, I suppose, conceive it first off?
Yes, well, it was a very long incubation, and it's intimately linked to, as I mentioned, my working in the sort of the social sciences and working with narratives, and wanting to always be able to connect to, in our act of observation, being wanted to connect to the qualitative and the storytelling, the power of storytelling. So that's been much of my sort of foundational career work. And it was by kind of just a coincidence that I was looking actually at a video for a men's retreat, that there happened to be a testimonial that was filmed in black and white, and I could just tell there was something different about the energy of the voice. And I was so intrigued. I was thinking, this is really subtle. I can't put words to it, but there's a different energy in the person. I can tell it's been filmed differently. And so I watched the credits, and I saw that it was filmed by Nick Askew, who's an English. He's worked a lot in documentaries. He had a previous career in advertising, but then moved into documentaries. And I found out that he ran training classes on how not to do anything behind the camera. And wow. So I attended a London one-day training event, and the continuity was in many ways perfect for me, because I was already working in large-scale narratives, large-scale storytelling type projects for organizations. And this just seemed to be the complete opposite end of the spectrum within the umbrella of storytelling, where it's one-to-one, it's on video, it's a spiritual practice. It's almost sort of, it's a performative, but a performance artistic element to it as well. And I needed this practice. I could sense immediately that it was going to be a deeply relevant step on my own personal journey, because in all of my career, I've been stuck in my head. And even though I was fascinated and working with a lot of psychology frameworks, which are even trying to capture some of the themes of wisdom, or trying to capture the themes of ego development. And I was really enjoying my subjects in organizational development, but I felt I was still trying to be an expert in what I was doing, and always wanting to sort of, or always under some pressure to demonstrate that you have the skill set, the knowledge, you're an expert in your domain. And I was coming to a classic sort of burnout phase of those kind of commercial type projects. And this seemed to be sitting behind the camera, not doing anything, not saying anything, just being who I am, and that being good enough was the necessary revelation. And I remember just sort of bursting out in laughter. Actually, there's a witnessing film, somebody else who's filming me. We had a cohort group of other people who did the same training, and for 2 years we had weekly calls, and we're trying to walk our talk in filming each other and being witnessed ourselves, as well as witnessing and filming others. And I remember, yes, in one of those films, just laughing, just saying, I can let go of all of my sort of prejudices and pressures on myself, and I can show up with my heart and just be there in presence for any person, and that's good enough. And it was such a relief, because yes, I was on the classic sort of, the more research you do, the less you realize you know. And in my previous sort of identity, so yeah, I got to it in these two strands, it being sort of coherent with my work in storytelling, but then it was a necessary step for me to take, to trust myself that I could be worthy, let's say, you know, in some of our moments of questioning, what is it I'm good at, what am I here for, and just being in presence with somebody was that revelation.
Wow.
Do your friends ever, do you ever make your people around you nervous because you're so able to stop and pay attention? It's just not something that we do. And leaving spaces in conversation and just the deep listening.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. There's I guess even an evolution in how I'm describing what it is I'm doing. But yes, you're hitting on something, even with regards to relations or friends who immediately, yes, will say, well, I've got nothing to say. And I say, well, that's the perfect opportunity. You're the person I need to sit in front of. And the other, I guess, yes, the other thing I'm still exploring is I am still sort of, this is an artisan type work, so I'm not advertising widely at the moment. I'm not trying to scale it, but the offer to somebody, would you like to sit together on film, and the less expectations of what this is for, the better. And that is, yes, that's received well by people who are sort of already within my trust network, and I'm still exploring how might that expand. And obviously you have wonderful practices like in the Quaker groups. I'm sure you're familiar with the Quaker silent groups. So I'm still exploring as how this might reach out to people who don't know me, and getting over some of those resistances, as you say, all those uncertainties. Yes.
We did enjoy the techniques that you use in order to allow things to flow through us for the videos. It was I would say unconventional. It's different. I wasn't expecting it. And just going through meditation, which we're we meditate and do that, but we never did that for a purpose of let's say advertising for something. We sit in a group and then we get together and then we allow spirit to flow. But the technique that you use was interesting. We had a lot of insight that came out. I loved your the black and white part of the filming. It just took away from the distraction into the message that is flowing. Was that something that you thought about it before, or it just happened as you progressed with your work?
Yes, so I'm just sort of leaping to a couple of answers. I've been, yes, in the community, people who do this type of filming, I guess I'm almost the only one that I know that is really explicitly putting in meditation practice at the beginning. But there's something that you were mentioning. I'm not directly answering your question, Ramzi, perhaps initially here, but there's something that pops up with regards to how the editing is actually a major part of what I think you were evoking. And there are always surprises for me when sitting with the material as to where it goes and how it ends up. I apologize, Ramzi. Could you just remind me of the exact framing of your question again? There's like a number of things that popped up. But
you designed this whole process in order to allow for a message to flow. And you managed to take the colors out of the filming in order for the message to be the focal point within the frame of that. How am I going to describe it? Within the frame of a message, it's just like everything fades away into grayness and darkness in the background, and then that image that shines through it. It's like somebody takes a red flower, puts it on a black background, and that's how I see your art flows through what you do. And that wasn't a question. Now it's a statement.
Yes. Well, no. Thank you. No, but your question opens up so many avenues, and so yes, I've been. Well, it was Nick Askew who really was working immediately and only in black and white. So he's definitely set the example as to how fascinating it is when we remove certain distractions. And we've found within our community of filming practice something, again, which is a really interesting surprise, because we often, as filmers, really put ourselves under a lot of pressure that we get the best image quality. So we're, is the lighting right? Is the positioning right? And what has been amazing is that sometimes some really poor quality mobile phone footage can still deliver this energetic connection. And I've even enjoyed some of my cohorts' experiments, and it's grainy, and that sort of almost sort of abstraction of your forced abstraction of the image, I found personally leading me even to a deeper connection to what they were saying, to what the person was saying. And I still get hung up about image quality, and I'm still juggling with another voice in my head saying you don't need to worry about image quality. And so these things have been just sort of revelations on the journey. So yes, there is a fascinating aspect of aesthetic, and aesthetic I'd like to use in many different kind of lenses, with I guess, yes, the obviously the visual aesthetic, and what I was referring to previously with the editing, the scope for my aesthetic subjective input through the editing is deeply enriching as an experience for me. When I'm editing, I can really see that I'm having to put my full self into the editing process, and I have to sit with the material for at least 3 days. I can't do an edit in one go, and I'm hearing the same sentence maybe 10 times, and yet hearing something new in the 10th replay as I'm going through the different segments on the timeline in the editing software. So I'm just stretching out, Ramzi, this sort of idea of aesthetic, image aesthetic, sort of the immediate picture quality, but then also the aesthetic of the editing choices. And yes, it's a sort of some ways an irony that I'm trying to portray somebody's portrait in an authentic way, but I'm having to bring my deepest self in the impossible decisions in which element of edits to take, because there's so many amazing things. But then another just reassuring part of this journey has been that I've been getting great feedback that I send off the final edit. I'm sort of praying, oh goodness me, I made some just totally intuitive decisions on the cut. I just hope they like it. And the feedback has consistently been, don't touch anything, it's great. So again, a rather sort of exploring around your question, Ramzi, and things are still sort of evolving in the practice. Yeah.
As when Ramzi and I, connected with you to do that filming, and you set the date, and we kind of had some heads up on how to organize ourselves, like with lighting and getting things like the sound quality right as well. But there's no other preparation other than the technical side of it, because it's really that presence that you're bringing, that bearing witness. So it's not like you've got notes or you don't know who's going to say what when, and there's a real freedom in that. I think there was no real time limit. I know we thought we'd be there for about an hour, give or take, but that took all of the pressure away, just that we can sit comfortably in complete silence, and knowing, I suppose, in the back of our minds that you're going to go into the editing. Nobody else has to sit through that long gap or that silence. And I think that's really where that connection that we made when we were doing the filming together must have carried over when you were in that place when you were doing the editing, because like how you were able to just kind of, sometimes like one of us or both of us were rambling a bit or whatever, but how you were able to extract, the sound bites that you did. It's like you're kind of going into the hour footage and you're pulling out these just beautiful sound bites that really encapsulate, what we were meeting for. Like, and it's like you've carried, that presence that you brought to us when we were all together, you brought every time you did the editing work, which really you don't know what you're going to end up with. And in a way, I remember being nervous about watching it first. I was like, oh gosh, I don't know, do I want to see or hear myself? The way you become a bit insecure about that. Well, I might be. But then, like, I found it fascinating to really listen, like, and I was like, wow, is that what we were saying? And it started to really help us at the time with the sort of landing of what are we doing? What is Spirit Cafe? What does it want to be? And it really helped us tremendously. I think to see each other too, because it was a new sort of area for us. So yeah, I was definitely fascinated by that process that you offer. Like, I don't know anywhere else where you can have such an experience genuinely.
Yes, thanks, Susie. Yes, well, you remind me, I mean, a bit more related to my technical background in organizational work. I went very deeply into developmental psychology. Sorry, got a sunset streaming through. And in developmental psychology, there's one sort of fundamental process, which is a move from subject to object. Talking of picture quality, shifts in picture quality. I guess my webcam has completely changed contrast. And the universality of just the value of externalizing a narrative, and then being able to see it from different angles has profound resonances with many contemplative traditions, many spiritual traditions, many storytelling traditions, even therapeutic processes of externalizing externalizing energetically and the power of a narrative, the power of a story. And even for our adult journeys, this is from my background in developmental psychology, we move through sort of key thresholds in how we make sense of our lives through those opportunities of how we look at ourselves from outside of ourselves. How do we see ourselves as object? And so that's one aspect that's always in the back of my mind with this filming work. As you say, it's a significant moment when somebody sends you an edit of you and you've got to sit down, you've got to watch yourself. And so I really take that with that's an important moment. And there are some extraordinary films that people in my cohort have done, including in very challenging subjects of mental health, for example, and these being very moving, people who are working with very deep subjects in their lives, and then seeing them, and then watching themselves talk through these very powerful emotions or experiences in their lives is an extraordinary step that the film offers us. And so, yeah, thanks for sort of just sort of reminding me of that sensation of getting to see yourself, and the whole process of externalization is a fantastic process, as you say, for seeing ourselves. And yeah, reflecting on things like more practical things like your project. What is this project about? That narrative can come through.
It feels very intimate. I saw a couple of your pieces before you did Suzi and Ramzi, and then I've seen, these are people that I don't know, but the exact opposite from any other media that we're exposed to nowadays feels so radical. And there's just a huge curiosity in me that opens up because it is quiet and there's space to contemplate, and then it's kind of turns into a mirror. And even though I don't know the people that that you have up on your site, I find myself caring and wanting to know even more, which is interesting now when we're just bombarded with so much visual stimulation. Everything is so stimulating now. It's a lovely break. It's such a peaceful break from all of that.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. Yes, I, in my more zealous moments, connect the video work to the possibilities of what might be the social media of the future. Because there's one artist that I've been following and who's been a very deep inspiration. He's an artist, an American artist who has a background in computer science, funnily enough, but he's done a lot of storytelling work, and he had a very large website of sort of instant moment photos, bringing people in to just take a photo of the mundane, the magic in the mundane. And he was inviting people to tell stories of the mundane, routine aspects of your life. This is a website of more sort of contemplative storytelling through a photo and just a few sentences of each photo. It was called Cowbird. And the artist he has almost sort of distilled what he sees as the opportunity of the future of how we connect online, rather than it being based on self-promotion in, subscribe to me, follow me, like me, going from self-promotion to self-reflection. How to go from compressing our stories into 30-second sound bites or tweets into deepening, where the content is curated in a way that these are personal reflections. And that reminds me of a quick quote from Carl Rogers of the more personal, the more universal, which I love as a wonderful sort of paradox. And then another third is actually sort of four qualities of what might be possible in the future for how we share and connect together in rich media online. And another one is with regards going from so there's the so from the sort of the soundbite compression to yes, I guess yes. The last one that comes back to me now is, rather than the half-life of a post being only 20 minutes before the views completely then just drop off, content that is curated in a way where it's evergreen, that you can always come back to it, always be relevant. So there are some exciting possibilities of just sort of distilling what might be the ingredients of media and ways that we come together with those kind of criteria.
I find that
really
so hopeful, because it just feels like we're being bombarded. And so I really appreciate what you're doing. You mentioned your fascination with the psychology of collectives. I've only seen work with one-on-one. Do you do this same thing with multiple people at the same time?
No, not in some ways, not yet, but I've witnessed and participated in quite a few circling type collective processes of authentic relating. And there's one process called Big Mind. I don't know whether you might have heard of that it was quite well known in the Ken Wilber Integral community, where it's almost sort of like family constellation work or internal constellation work of inviting a voice, asking permission for this voice to speak. And so what you're doing with Spirit Cafe, I mean, that's the extraordinary step. That collective, you're already part of my deep interest in what is possible with my filming work. It's interesting because there's sort of the meditation first 5 minutes. There's some quality of when there's somebody at the other end of the camera who's meditating with me, who may be at another continent. There's a quality of my meditation which I feel different because I know somebody is there. And when you're bringing together with Spirit Cafe people collectively, there's a different quality that is there. So I'm not yet actually sort of rolling a particular format out, but I have one collaborator from my same cohort who has done some work where there are two people on a stage who are witnessing, and there is an audience, a live audience, who are watching a one-to-one filming happening, which has some very interesting feedback. But yes, so you're pointing to hopefully my next steps.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in that authenticity, that you're offering. Obviously, you're kind of coming into some sort of an alignment with the few minutes of silence, resting in awareness, resting in the heart space, really opening up that just kind of part of ourselves. Whereas in contrast, like you said, to the social media, selfies and, Instagrammable stuff, it's a totally different side. Like, so within a collective, I feel when two people come together, like I was just thinking about what you were saying, if two people are being filmed doing this with an audience watching, it gives everybody starts to relate in that way. They relate from a different part of themselves. And so immediately, I don't know, it all feels like it goes in a much, like, is it a more cohesive, more coherent kind of direction, heart-based connection? You're not putting on a mask and trying to, pull the wool over or something like that. It's really genuine, authentic connection. And that's what really does happen. I suppose we don't film Spirit Cafe so that people can feel that they can make that connection and that they can freely tune in and see what's coming through in a space that's very supportive. But to film that, I feel like is like taking it all another step further. So yeah, I don't know. What do you feel about that, Ramzi? The filming of the... Are you gone? Can't hear you.
I was muted. I never knew
Yeah.
that I can be muted. I'm muted. I had something close to that. What I was thinking about is that, do certain type of clients levitates towards you, or do you have a specific type that you actually would like to work with, or anyone that comes in through the door you just accept directly? And that's what we see with the Spirit Cafe. It's like on and off, but it's the same type of format in a closed environment, but yours is more on what do you call it? It's more open.
Yes, well, in fact, all of my filmings, I have pretty much reached out to people who I would like to film. And I initially started out really with a specific focus on filming artists. And I was fascinated in capturing the narrative behind the creative experience and looking for those universal connections of what is, for me, in some ways, almost the not necessarily redefinition of art, but a reappreciation of the layers of what art represents in our society and in our lives, and even the sort of the pressures of, people say AI is going to take over art and is devaluing what artists are producing. And in many ways, that just, for me, sort of highlights that pressures such as AI are invitations for us to appreciate what are the essential qualities and aspects and gifts of the creative experience, and it not necessarily being about the artifacts of art. And I was also wanting to connect the domains of, when I'm fascinated about interfaith research, and to what extent is the creative experience the equivalent of a spiritual practice. And so I deliberately went out to film mainly artists at the beginning, and I remember just my hands shaking when trying to cold call some artists here in France that I admire a great deal. And I just sent them one first sort of prototype video that I did with an artist friend who was very willing to experiment and dive into this silence. They were very trusting, and thanks to that first prototype film, I managed to get some. At least, I was delighted that people were willing to invite me to their place, and I could film them. And within just, it was maybe my third film, a well-known artist here in France, we're sitting together in his studio, and we're just crying. And I'm sitting there thinking, this is why I'm here. This is exactly everything that I've hoped for. And he hasn't said anything. We're sitting there in silence, and we're just both crying. So that was exactly, I guess, I went into film proactively, the artistic community, because I felt that was a sort of a more open, yes, people like that who are working with their emotions, I guess maybe there's some aspect of the artistic performance aspect that might be fertile for the sort of film community. They have a lot to say, but they have interviews where the words are very sort of staged, and so artists have been a very willing and wonderfully inviting community of people for me to film, to offer the words behind what it is they're creating. But otherwise, yes, it's still early days. I mean, I've been doing the filming for 4 years, but it still feels very early days as to how this relationship might work. In some ways, your question is prompting me, yes, with regards to if I was to advertise more widely, who might come to me, and that relationship of me going towards others. I'm still reflecting on that. There's a very recent aspect, which is I'm even incorporating artificial intelligence into my video library right now, and using AI to rediscover my archive. And I'm just wondering whether that might sort of change in many ways how, where, and why I might continue and grow this practice. But yes, your question is still wide open.
Here's AI a couple of times. Do you think using AI in art would help, or would it hinder the process? And I'm, of course, it's a very wide question, but in terms of what you do in order to showcase a message that actually flows through rather than come out of the from the mind.
Yes, well, I'm really going into quite a lot of depth of organizing my thinking on that, because I was just in Venice last month to present this artificial intelligence portal, so you can ask my 55 portraits so far any question, and then you'll get a montage edit of the snip. Now, I've gone into a lot of depth to really sort of highlight where AI is a danger and where AI is an enabler. And just stepping back for a moment, actually, I'm very, I guess, yes, orientated towards the integral philosophy. There's an American philosopher called Ken Wilber, and he, in the 1980s, published incredible works which were bringing basically the science, the faith traditions, and the arts together. He was helping me to make sense of, for example, deep contrast in my own family and their own faith and their own sort of rationality. And The Marriage of Sense and Soul is one of the books that Ken Wilber wrote, the marriage of science and contemplative traditions. And I actually am really working with the fact that art is a technology, and technology there's also something spiritual about technology. And with regards to religion, the religion is a technology, but then technology is also a religion, and we're seeing very much the sort of the shadow side of technology as a religion in our modern material world. But then we can see, even the relationship between art and science. There's some fascinating works on looking at the relationships of how actually art, there is a science of art, and there's an art to science. And so to answer your question, Ramzi, actually, I'm presenting right now, and there's a whole page on my website about this with regards the AI as within the sort of the sciences, within a sort of a striving for rationality, a striving for our coming together with some coordination of our constructs in understanding the world. I would put that into the sort of the scientific domain. That we can't understand science without understanding art and religion. We can't understand art without understanding its relationship to science and technology. So these sort of three, the good, the true, and the beautiful, the science, arts, and religions are one of a whole. And so I'm seeing AI as obviously both sides. It can be generative, it can have a shadow side, just as art can be generative and have a shadow side, just as religions can be generative and have a shadow side. So I'm really working sort of how can I even understand art in my own sort of generation and the role of art in society. And right now I'm holding it together with that we need to see art as a faith practice and art also as a technology. And so therefore we can also then see AI technology as artistic in some ways itself, and also it's faith. Each time I'm just sort of looping between the good, the true, and the beautiful, if you see what I mean. The liminality between each of these truth claims, what is scientific, what is aesthetic, and what is meaningful in terms of our ethics and arts. And so there's, yes, I mean, a movement between all these three, and AI is one of those three, and they all hold together. And I'm kind of currently experimenting with how might AI be part of my spiritual practice.
Wow.
And so kind of recall to Matrix trilogy final scenes of Neo connecting to the machine world, if you're familiar with that. But anyhow, that's what I'm playing with right now. Not just putting AI in a bucket of, oh, it's going to crush art and so forth, but how might we engage with and see AI as some movement towards an incredible coordination of the human artifacts and coordination of human artifacts that brings us to another level of construct. And but that can only be held safely if it's also I feel seen within the faith stroke religion, and also held with the artistic aesthetic. A long answer. And Tyler.world/AI will give you a whole chunk of what I've just been saying and my presentation in Venice just last month.
Wow, I definitely want to check that out. You know, it's early days really for all of us with AI, isn't it? And it can either kind of bring up the fear in us, or, you know, is it mirroring back to us? Is it as good as the person inputting the data? You know, like I think for me personally, we have to embrace technology, because, you know, if we get lost and left behind from a technological point of view, maybe it's a liberation in itself, you know, to break away from the whole technology. But you know, if we're going to stay connected with each other, and I believe in harnessing technology, as even within, like, you know, I lead that meditation every Monday, and with this group all around the world, like, we're totally harnessing technology there. You know, we get this beautiful opportunity and to come together. But I don't know, when it gets to AI, then like it kind of boggles me a little bit, kind of the scope of it. So, but I think it's great when artists and creators and scientists, like you said, come together and start to play with it, and kind of, you know, tease out the different kind of aspects of it. I think that's what that's how we'll learn, I guess, and educate, and, you know, integrate it maybe. So I'm definitely going to check out that /AI aspect of Tyler World. It's a good segue to talk about Tyler World, maybe if you're up for it, John.
Yes, delighted.
I have a question about that.
Yeah, go on.
Please.
You are using an alias. Why?
Yes, because I'm fascinated about sort of ego and non-ego, and the moment 5 years ago, sitting in a cafe, knowing I needed to radically change my own identity, how I see myself. And I guess that's one of the hardest things. I say that also in one of my witnessing videos where somebody's filming me, that has been the biggest struggle, is to see myself. And at least I can speak to the artist in me. So I've been, yes, very interested in the arts for many years, and I have a sister who for 20 years was facilitating Artist Way workshops. I don't know whether you know that book by Julia Cameron. It's a wonderful sort of 12-week process of working through the inner resistances to the creative act. And I mean, I've heard this through obviously other creatives. By having an alias, you are in conversation in very similar terms as the sort of internal constellations and internal voice work. And what I was, I guess, also wanting to experiment with is when I have, even before filming artists, a theme that I came across when reading biographies of artists and hearing artists on various sort of podcasts and interviews. So many artists would say, I was doing that artwork and I stepped back and I said, wow, did I do that? And whether it's an author, there's a wonderful Irish author called Sebastian Barry, and he was being interviewed by an audience as to the characters in his book and so forth. And why did that character do this? And the author replies, you know what, you're going to have to ask the author. You're going to have to ask the character, because I just showed up at the writing table. It took me 4 months just sitting there at the writing table before these characters came in to speak in my head. And so many artists say, yes, that wasn't me who made that. And I just wanted to sort of emphasize that and give myself, in some ways, a sort of, I guess, some sort of scaffolding to that sheer movement of externalizing by giving myself an artistic name.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants to come in next? I'm just looking at Tyler World online. You had an exhibition. Is that your exhibition, John? Run from escape into the machine, excuse me.
Yes. So, yes, that's very much on the exact theme I was mentioning of how we play with the arts, science, and religions. And yes, so running from and into the machine, the movement is very interesting for me with regards to, for example, AI is a fantastic tool for harvesting and consolidating and connecting. But then art is, for me, the one domain that I see as being the most, let's say, fertile for how do we break things apart? How do we separate? How do we rediscover creative destruction? How do we diverge? And those almost being breathing in and breathing out. So sort of running from the machine, but then running into the machine. By running away from the machines, we actually sort of run into the machines. And there's a theme of paintings that I did, a series of paintings that I did, which are kind of evoked very much by it all being movement, all being dynamic. And there's even one particular kind of figurative abstract painting that I did, which really spoke to I love this is another artist who spoke to this point of everything being movement, which then asks a big question of ourselves. So I'm not the same person once I finished an artwork, the who I was before I made the artwork. So I'm shaped by the art as it emerges. So I feel that I'm in a very rich opportunity of developing and learning continually. But then, so who was the person who made that work of art? Was it the person at the beginning of the artwork, or the new Tyler at the end of the artwork? And so yes, that sort of we can't get away from the fact that everything is movement and running from technology and running into technology that's alive, yes, very much in the background as to the initial inspirations, yes, for art gallery collection that I was working on.
Cool. Like there's a real, like Kathy does a lot of work with paint as a medium. She's a visual medicine. We were, it's something that we use even in meditation when Kathy leads it. Maybe you can talk about it more, Kathy, to kind of set it up. But so there's the person who creates the art, but then there's the person who's the observer with the art, and well, with the visual medicine, like where it takes us, those kind of journeys that we go on when we look at the, when you guide us into how to look at the art, I suppose that's part of it. Like, do you want to just share a bit more about the visual medicine, Kathy, just so that John has a...
It's using art as an oracle. It's combining an idea or an ask or an object and then painting in a very abstract, uncontrolled way, and then receiving an answer. And I use it, for my own practice. That is my spiritual practice now. It's woven into all parts of my life. But other people can enter into these paintings also with different questions on different days. I mean, I guess it's like going to a gallery without the artist's statement and knowing what you're supposed to see or feel or receive. You get to receive what you're gonna see. It's a fascinating practice that, oracle.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And I think that's maybe, I'm curious about, your overlaps then, John, in terms of like, Tyler World and the other work, like, and do they cross over, or are they two separate aspects of your creativity? Like, how do they converge at some point?
Yes, thanks for sharing that, Kathy. Yes, so at least what Kathy is speaking to has been a huge influence for me, as whether they're art therapists or lots of sort of art history narratives highlight just how extraordinary people like Hilma af Klint and her conversations with Rudolf Steiner. That mediumship is absolutely fascinating to me, and this is what I aspire to. So I salute you, Kathy. It's a, again, I'm not wanting to collapse it, but it's a reliable. I mean, you could almost say, try this at home, and you can prove it for yourself. This is a scientific practice of that energetic willingness to step into those creative moments are just, for me, indisputable. And you're another wonderful ambassador, Kathy. So yes, to answer your question, Susie, these are shared common fundamental stones, and the conference that we met at is again speaking to that whole aspect of the field, Lynn McTaggart, this whole hidden domain that with Spirit Cafe also you're connecting into. So we're all all drawing on the same fabric.
Agreed. Guys, we are coming close to the hour. My God, time flies every time we're having an awesome conversation with anyone. And John, Do you have anything that you're working on that you'd like to bring out to the listeners?
Well, there's, I guess, yes, if you want to ask a question of 55 people who have sat with me in silence, then from the tyler.world/AI, you'll see a link to it's like a Google window portal. Just ask a question, and would love anybody who's interested. That's just literally gone live in the last week. And yep, that would be one invitation. It's fresh on my side.
Okay, we'll check it out. I'll check it out myself, definitely. Are you going to be at the Science Consciousness this year?
Not sure. I was in Venice with Peter Mary just 3 weeks ago now. So I hope to, yes.
We hope to see you there because the three of us will be there this year. So we'll hope to meet you in person.
No way. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. Even more incentive. Well, it's nearly sold out. Well, I think very close to being sold out, as Peter told me 3 weeks ago. So who knows? It might have already been sold out. But,
wow.
And I've done some filming there in the past. So I might be there sort of as part of a filming sort of satellite team. Fingers crossed.
Cool.
So with that, we come to the end of our podcast. I thank everybody who joined us on Facebook, Instagram, and of course, YouTube. Thank you all for coming. John, it's been a pleasure working with you at the beginning of the year, end of last year, this year. Thank you very, very much. And thank you for joining us at Open Mic UK.
Thanks, John.